and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Lee Jae-myung is set to hold a press conference on Wednesday for the first time since relocating to the Blue House, where he will outline policy priorities for the year ahead. US President Donald Trump gave a press briefing marking a year since his return to the White House, touting his administration's achievements and addressing a range of issues, including Greenland. Former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is set to receive a first-instance verdict on charges of aiding and abetting an insurrection, a ruling that will also mark the judiciary's first determination of whether the December 3rd emergency martial law declaration constitutes an act of insurrection. President Lee Jae-myung will hold his New Year's press conference at the Blue House today. Senior Presidential Secretary for Public Relations and Communications Lee Kyun told reporters on Friday that around 160 domestic and international journalists will attend the 90-minute event at the Yeongbin-gwan Reception Hall. The Q&A session will be divided into three categories: the economy, diplomacy and national security, and society and culture. President Lee will also share his policy priorities for the year. US President Donald Trump says massive investment funds secured from South Korea and Japan will be channeled into an Alaska natural gas project, underscoring his America First economic agenda. The announcement, made on the first anniversary of his second-term inauguration, also reignited debate over tariffs and the role of foreign investment in US energy development. Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump marked the first anniversary of his second-term inauguration on Tuesday with the White House news conference, highlighting his economic record and renewed America First push. Trump announced that large investment funds secured through trade deals with South Korea and Japan will be directed to an Alaska natural gas development project, calling the agreements unprecedented. He said the Alaska pipeline will export natural gas to Asian markets. Under the deal, South Korea agreed to invest $350 billion in the U.S. in exchange for lowering reciprocal tariffs from 25% to 15%. Of that amount, $150 billion will go to shipbuilding, while $200 billion will be allocated to energy, semiconductors, and artificial intelligence tied to national security. Japan pledged a separate $550 billion in investment. The Alaska LNG project, a key Trump initiative, involves a 1,300-kilometer pipeline from Alaska's North Slope, with initial costs estimated at $45 billion. During the news conference, Trump also touted his first-year accomplishments, dramatically tossing a stack of papers he said documented his record onto the floor before turning to inflation and criticizing the Biden administration's economic policies.
But here's the book. These are all things we have. I'm going to read a few of the samples, but look at this. These are all, each line is something that we did. Nobody did that before. And it's big stuff, too. Look, we have the hottest country in the world.
Trump also addressed ongoing legal uncertainty over his global tariffs, saying he does not know how the Supreme Court will rule, and acknowledged that the U.S. could be forced to repay hundreds of billions of dollars if it loses. He nonetheless defended the tariffs as essential for national security and federal revenue, insisting they have not fueled inflation.
I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do. If we lose that case, it's possible we're going to have to do the best we can in paying it back. I don't know how that's going to be done very easily without hurting a lot of people. But we're waiting for that case anxiously.
The comments come as the Supreme Court has yet to rule on the tariff case, despite expectations that a decision could come as early as this week. In August, a federal appeals court ruled that Trump's use of the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act exceeded presidential authority, affirming a lower court's decision issued last May. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Leading on from that, it's been 1 year since Donald Trump returned to the White House, where he has reshaped U.S. trade, security, and diplomatic priorities. To assess what that first year has meant for South Korea, we're joined by Matthew David Jenkins, Associate Professor from the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University. Professor Jenkins, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So Trump's tariff policies have been at the forefront in terms of key issues for South Korea, and there are still some uncertainties surrounding key export sectors such as memory chips. So what do you make of the trade deal between Washington and Seoul thus far, and how do you see it progressing?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, it's a pretty good, significant achievement in terms of the initial reduction in tariffs, right? Going from 25 to 15. So I think that's a remarkable achievement. However, a major sticking point remains the memory chips and whether that tariff rate will continue to apply to those as well. So that's obviously very important for South Korea to have, to be able to export memory chips. It's a major part of its economy. And it's also a major part of the U.S.'s economy as well, because the chips go into the U.S. consumer products, right? AI and things like this. And so the issue now is the Trump administration is threatening a 100% tariff on those chips, which is very high and would be damaging both to the U.S. and to South Korea. Why would it be doing that? Well, Trump's tariffs are designed to be used as leverage to get something else. So what does the U.S. want? Probably they want more investment in manufacturing, chip manufacturing in the United States. Could be that, or it could be that they want South Korea to further, decouple from China, to further limit chip exports to China, or chip manufacturing in China. I think both of those things are pretty unrealistic, right? South Korean companies are already very committed. They've already committed to companies like Samsung and SK Hynix have committed, billions of dollars of investment in the United States. It would be very problematic to try to reduce production in China. And so I imagine that, maybe there'll be some minor concessions, but I imagine that this deal will move through without any major changes.
And building on the discussion around trade, so Seoul continues to navigate the intensifying rivalry between the U.S. and China. And how do you think South Korea has been effectively managing to balance the tensions between them? And how do you see this dynamic unfolding going forward?
I think Korea's doing a great job. It's in a very tricky situation, between a rock and a hard place, right? On the one hand, it has to keep the U.S. happy in terms of its military alliance, right, and strategic positions around the peninsula, and at the same time, it has to signal to China that, hey, we're not trying to contain you. We're here for business, right? And the thing with the U.S. is mostly because of North Korea, and that's the reason why we have this major alliance. And so it's been doing a really good job. I think President Yi has been doing a great job at sort of balancing those. We saw that as evidence. We saw in the recent visit to China, right? They were able to make some progress on the K-pop, right? The Hallyu ban, right? To allow more Korean pop groups to have more freedom in performing in China and things like this. So I see some progress there. At the same time, he's mostly been keeping the Trump administration happy in terms of being willing to be flexible with its alliance, in terms of pivoting toward the broader Indo-Pacific region. And I feel like that he's going to continue to maintain that pragmatic, practical balancing act as we go forward. It's going to become more difficult as the chip situation becomes more, integrated with military, right? As military has become more fueled by AI and fueled by technology and drones, it's going to become trickier to do that. But for the meantime, I think he's going to be doing a pretty good job.
Right, so other than trade, South Korea and the U.S. have also made a pact to build nuclear-powered submarines together. And what do you think this joint project signifies for South Korea?
Yeah, so on the one hand, it's really significant, right? It means that, the U.S. does not share that technology, like nuclear submarine technology, with everybody. It's only shared it with, historically, the United Kingdom and Australia. And so it's kind of signaling that South Korea is sort of moving towards the inner circle of the U.S. alliance commitments, right? How much that means in the current administration is unclear, given how he's treating his European partners. But for the meantime, I think we can look at this as like a signal that Korea's importance is certainly elevated. It gives it more autonomy to move not just around the peninsula, but through to be a broader maritime power, right, in the region. Obviously, it gives it a strategic advantage over North Korea. So there are a number of positive effects, but certainly this looks like an elevation of its status within the U.S. alliance network.
Right, and Trump has also made several offers for talks with North Korea during his tenure, as Pyongyang demands to be acknowledged as a nuclear power. And how do you see the Trump administration navigating through this?
Yeah, so I think Trump has been pretty clear about this, and he's has dropped the talks of denuclearization. He has already de facto recognized North Korea as a nuclear power, without explicitly saying, "Oh, it's sanctioned by international law" or something like this. So I think for him, meeting with Kim Jong-un would not mean, doesn't equal recognition as a nuclear power in his, right? Everything is just pragmatic, and he's not really concerned about formal statuses or the language that people use. And so that's pretty much been his policy so far. In terms of pursuing further talks, I think at this point, I don't really see a lot of advantages. I don't see a lot to gain from meeting with North Korea unless they're willing to actually make us substantive changes, which seems pretty unlikely. So it's unclear what he would actually get if denuclearization is not the point and they're not actively at war, right, or at the risk of war. It's unclear what he would have to gain from that, unless they're going to offer something big, right? And that doesn't seem like that's going to happen right now.
Okay, thank you for your insight today, Professor. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is set to hear the verdict in his trial over his role in the December 3rd martial law declaration. The ruling will set the tone for former President Yoon as the court decides on whether the martial law declaration by former President Yoon Suk-yeol was an act of insurrection. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
CCTV footage from December 3rd, 2024 captures the historic moment when then-President Yoon Suk-yeol leaves a room with his cabinet to declare martial law. His cabinet is seen sitting motionless, failing to intervene. The evidence emerged during the trial of former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, with the court delivering its verdict on Wednesday afternoon. The ruling will set a critical precedent, marking the first time a court will decide if a martial law declaration itself constitutes an act of criminal insurrection. Han faces charges of perjury and abetting the ringleader, with prosecutors arguing the move was an attempt to seize power through a self-coup.
The December 3rd martial law declaration is believed to have stemmed from the idea that it would succeed, much like a typical self-coup.
Prosecutors have requested a 15-year prison sentence, arguing Han abandoned his duty as the only official capable of stopping the situation. Han denies the allegations. He admits failing to prevent the declaration, but testified he never agreed with or aided the attempt.
Although I failed to stop the martial law declaration, I never agreed to it or attempted to help. That is the most honest, final confession I can offer in this historic courtroom today.
The ruling will inevitably impact the ruling of former President Yoon, set for February 19th, and 4 other cabinet members. Yoon faces charges of leading an insurrection, for which prosecutors have demanded the death penalty, which is the statutory maximum. If the court accepts the insurrection charge in Han's verdict, it signals a grim outlook for the former president. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea is moving to ease its doctor shortage with an additional national medical licensing exam this year. The measure allows fourth-year medical students who returned to school last summer after policy disputes to qualify for licensure by August. About 1,800 students graduating that month are expected to receive licenses and enter hospitals immediately. The Health Ministry says the rare supplementary exam will be held in spring and summer, with clinical skills tests running from March to April and a written exam scheduled for July. Normally, the medical licensing exam is held once a year in the fall and winter. In Central Seoul's Yongsan-gu district lies the War Memorial of Korea, which recently witnessed its number of foreign visitors triple in just 3 years. Our Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
From 170,000 in 2022 to more than 520,000 in 2025. That is more than a threefold increase in the number of foreign visitors to the War Memorial of Korea. Worldwide interest in South Korea's culture has spilled over into K-history, and many foreign officials' visits to the War Museum pushed the increase in numbers.
Last year, about 1,500 VIPs from 105 countries visited the memorial and found it very helpful in learning about Korea. Participant nations in the Korean War also said the exhibition was deeply moving in its powerful presentation of their history.
General Xavier Brunson, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea, recently visited as well, hinting at the possibility of including visits to the War Memorial of Korea in educational programs for U.S. service members stationed here.
It would foster pride and a sense of duty, reaffirm the Korea-U.S. blood alliance, and greatly strengthen the morale and mission awareness of the U.S. Forces Korea.
As if to show the boosted interest in Korean history, there were many foreign visitors even in the freezing cold.
I've been recommended by some colleagues at work to come here. I think it's particularly important to learn about the history of the country.
Many foreign visitors' main interest lies in the Korean War, during which General MacArthur's Incheon landing successfully ended the North's occupation of the South and led to the current division of the Korean Peninsula with DMZ in the middle. Another exhibition room that draws attention is the section explaining how UN member states dispatched troops and medical units to support the Republic of Korea.
Through detailed accounts of the roles played by troops and medical teams from 22 UN member countries, visitors can learn about their own nation's contributions. This helps them feel a deeper connection to Seoul and a shared sense of history.
As global interest in Korea continues to grow, the War Memorial of Korea is emerging as a key destination, serving as a powerful gateway to understanding the country's past. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States will very shortly begin targeting drugs entering the country by land, expanding his administration's anti-narcotics campaign. Trump told reporters on Tuesday that the move follows U.S. military strikes on suspected drug boats in the Caribbean Sea and Pacific Ocean, which he said has sharply reduced drug trafficking by water. He said land routes are now the focus, but did not name any country involved in the trafficking. Trump's remarks come as U.S. military forces seized a 7th oil tanker linked to Venezuela on Tuesday. The U.S. Justice Department has served 6 grand jury subpoenas to Minnesota state and local officials as part of an investigation into alleged obstruction of federal immigration enforcement. Those subpoenaed on Tuesday include Democratic Governor Tim Walz, the Attorney General, and the Mayor of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Sources told the Associated Press the probe centers on public statements and possible violations of a federal conspiracy statute related to obstruction of immigration authorities. Minnesota officials called the investigation politically motivated, while federal attorneys said that the state is improperly seeking to limit federal law enforcement powers. The subpoenas come amid weeks of unrest following an immigration crackdown. Iranian authorities have reportedly shut down 40,000 Starlink satellite internet terminals, tightening information controls following weeks of anti-government protests. That's according to German news outlet DPA, citing Iranian state media. Officials have not clarified whether the devices were physically seized or remotely deactivated. But the move comes despite earlier promises to gradually restore internet access. Iran is now reportedly pushing to permanently restrict global internet access to a small group of government-approved users, while the broader population remains confined to a state-controlled domestic network. Netflix has revised its takeover bid for Warner Bros. Discovery, offering an all-cash bid of $72 billion to secure shareholder approval and fend off a rival bid from Paramount. The revised deal released on Tuesday keeps the price at $27.75 per share, removes stock components, and aims to speed up a shareholder vote, expected as early as April. Warner's board again backed Netflix's offer, while Paramount looks to legal action and a potential proxy fight. Analysts say whichever deal prevails will face intense antitrust scrutiny and a prolonged regulatory review.
Yesterday's bitter winds were already harsh, but it's even colder today. Seoul saw the coldest morning of the season at minus 13 degrees Celsius, and of course that freezing air is adding more chill to the air. Along with the cold, heavy snow is falling across the west coast of the Jeolla-do provinces and Jeju Island. Through tomorrow, Ulleungdo could see up to 30 centimeters of snowfall. Mountainous areas of Jeju Island might receive up to 25 centimeters. The west coast of Jeolla-do might get up to 10 centimeters with a heavy snow advisor issued in those regions. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to minus 5 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gwangju make it to 0 degrees this afternoon. And this round of intense cold is forecast to reach its peak tomorrow, while snow will linger along the west coast and Jeju Island. And on this bone-chilling day, stretching a bit before heading out could help keep your body movement smooth, which will lower the risk of slipping or sudden muscle strain. Stay warm and safe.
We'll be back with our special news coverage on President Lee Jae-myung's New Year's press conference in just a few moments. Thanks for watching.